With all due respect, he couldn't see them.
Okay.
It was on the radio.
Remember, everything you're saying now is being taped.
But it's still
So, Don Sterling evidently was not aware of that. So this is full disclosure.
Was BuzzFeed confirming Sterling?
We're
No, he was talking about magic.
we're on 161.
He didn't talk about
161.
And we're talking about Twilight, not the books.
I'm not.
Betty's the only one that got the reference.
Yeah.
My grandkids.
Yeah.
I don't know, Twilight. That was a long time ago already, but
Yes,
those were.
Wow.
All right, so yes, it's not about vampires. So it's when vampires come out, though. So 161, top of the page. So Twilight is a difficult time to define in general, but we don't care about in general. Maybe we do a little bit, but we're interested for halakhic purposes. There's sometimes you need to know when it's night and when it's day, and twilight confuses us. Is it night or is it day? So the context we've been talking about was Shabbat, and putting up an eruv on if it goes up on twilight. But all the laws of Shabbat. Can you light your candles if it's twilight, but it's not light, it's not dark? So that's why we're trying to come up with a definition of twilight is. Not for metaphysical reasons about vampires, but because we want to know for halakhic purposes. Sometimes we need to know for Jewish law. All right, so we're trying to get a definition. We did this last time, so I'll go through it quickly. Ezehu banish mashmot. So what does it mean, twilight? Interesting, even the term, I hadn't mentioned this before, the term ben hashmashot, can't say it, ben hashmashot means between the suns. So between the suns, so it's between the sun setting and sun disappearing. That's sort of two suns. The sun in the sky and the sun disappearing. That time right in between is called twilight. And I think to this day in modern Hebrew, that's the word for twilight. Ben hashmashot. Very poetic noun for twilight. Between the suns. All right. Vezu ben hashmashot. Mesha tishka chama. Kol zman shepnei hamizrach madimim. Okay, so the sun is setting, and the face of the eastern sky, that becomes important later. So the face of the eastern sky, where the sun, of course, the sun sets in the west. So the eastern sky is sort of behind you if you're watching the sunset. The face of they're talking about the face of the eastern sky is pink. Okay, and we're continuing. Hichsifa tachton, so the bottom part has lost its color. Velo hichsifa elyon, but the top part of the sky hasn't lost its color, so presumably it's still in that pinkish. Ben hashmashot. That's twilight. So you look at the sky, you see a particular color, and you know now it's twilight. Now he goes on. But if the top part has lost its color and it looks like the bottom part, not entirely dark at this point, but there's no red, zeh laila. So that's nighttime. All that is divrei Rabbi Yehuda. So all that is the words of Rabbi Yehuda. He has a very, very simple definition. It has to do with he divides the sky into two parts, the top of the sky, the bottom of the sky. As long as the top of the sky, the upper sky, still has its color, then it's twilight, the reddish color. Rabbi Nehemiah has a whole different definition and really a whole different conceptual system. Rabbi Nehemiah Omer, Kadesh Yalech Adam Meshetishkach Hama Chatzi Mil. So twilight is a unit of time, but as I said last time, he measures a unit of time in distance. So it's the time it takes a person to walk half a mile. So when the sun sets, from the time the sun sets through the time it takes a person to walk half a mile, that's twilight. And I said that was normal in those days, and some primitive societies nowadays don't talk in minutes, they talk in distance, even when they're talking about time. They'll say, I'll meet you in half a mile. By half a mile, they mean in the time it takes a normal person to walk half a mile, or the time it takes me. So in general, around, and so it's much less accurate. Okay. Rabbi Yossi Omer, so now a third opinion. Rabbi Yossi Omer ben hashmashot keheraf ayin. Rabbi Yossi says twilight actually is the blink of an eye. It's not a measurable time. It's like a unit on a line, like a point on a line. It's got some reality, but it's not. You can't measure it. Keheraf ayin zeh nechnas v'zeh yotzeh v'efshar lamod alav. It comes, it goes, but you can't point to the exact moment because as soon as it's here, it's gone. So there's not a unit of time that can measure it.
So it's really meaningless. It's either
day or meaningless. Night. For him, it's meaningless. Nothing can happen during twilight, is what he's saying. So we're worried about what if the eruv is up during twilight, and he says that doesn't happen. Twilight is just, he's not denying that it exists. He's denying that it has any significance.
Can't measure it.
Okay. It's not measurable, right? Okay, going to keep going. Amar. Matilin oto lechomer shnei yamim. Okay. So we had said earlier, and now we're going to come back to this, that the reason twilight is a difficulty is because it's in the halacha category, Talmudic category of safek. Safek means doubt. We don't know what it is. All right, now we had some differences of opinion about what you do with doubtful things, doubtful concepts. So one is that we had one, I don't even remember what it was, something to do with the Eruv. So when it's doubtful, if it got up when it was supposed to get up, you rule it Lakula. So Lakula means the most lenient ruling, the most convenient ruling. But later we had an opinion that says whenever it's safek, whenever something is doubtful, you rule it Lachumra. Chumra means you give the more strict ruling. So now we have a quote right here. Amar matilin moto lechomer shnei yamim. So you give the most chomer means the most strict ruling when you're dealing with 2 days. Okay? I'll explain, hopefully. L'ma hilchata, because l'ma hilchata means what are you talking about here? What halacha are you referring to that actually makes a practical difference in my life? Okay, our lives. Amar Rav Huna. So Rav Huna answers, Berei de Rav Yoshua, the son of Rav Yeshua, li'inyan tuma. So it matters when it comes to impurity. They are talking about the impurity that comes from an emission, a nightly emission from a man. Okay? I'm not going to get any more specific than that. I'm going to assume we all understand at this point. It's a nightly emission. So a nightly emission makes you impure. Okay? There are laws about that. Now, these laws don't hold anymore. They only held when the temple was around. So the temple's not around anymore. God willing, speedily in our day, we'll rebuild the temple, and then these laws will apply. But for now, tonight, don't worry about it. The laws don't apply. Okay, but if the laws did apply, so we're in that hypothetical situation right now. If the laws did apply, this is the hypothetical situation. Kidiknan, as it says, Ra'ah shnei yamim ben hashmashot. Okay, so this is the law. Let's say you have an emission, and then the next day you have an emission. So the first day you have an emission, you get a pass on that. Big deal. Can happen to anybody. No problem at all. If it happens 2 nights in a row, you're impure. If you're impure, all it means is so you have to go to the mikveh. You go to the mikveh, and then you're impure until nighttime, and then you're pure again. Okay? So it only happens if it's twice. Okay. Now, if it happens 3 times in a row, not only do you have to go to the mikveh, you have to offer a sacrifice. That's the law. That's the halacha. Okay. Now let's say that it happens twice. Both times are at twilight. So if it's twilight day 1, twilight day 2, there's all sorts of interpretations here. So one possibility would be, I'm going to explain it, then we'll read it. So one possibility is that it all happened in the same day. Because if you're defining twilight, you could say it was the night of the previous day, but it was still day of that day. So it happened just once, just one day, which means I'm not pure. I'm not impure. There's no tuma. It all happened in one day. Okay? You could but you could also interpret it as that's 2 separate days. By the way, you could also interpret it as it happened 3 days. Because you say one happened the day before, and then since it was twilight, that also counts for the next day. And then the third one you count for the next day could even be 4 days. Because the twilight means it could happen twice. Okay. So what this is saying is you take the strictest interpretation. So if it happens those 2 times, you don't say, it only happened once, so I don't have to go to the mikveh. In fact, you say it happened 3 times. You could even say 4 times, but 3 is it's 3 and up that you have to bring the sacrifice. 3 is the minimum. Okay, so that's what it says. So that's why it's important for us to know when twilight is, because that's why, and that makes, when we say that something is in doubt and therefore we rule it the most strict ruling. Here's an example of that. The example that we have, and by the way, it should be only one of many examples. They're trying to give this as an example of you rule the strictest way. Okay, I'm going to read it now in the text. Kiditzan ra'ah shnei yamim ben hashmashot. So a person sees the emission twice, 2 times in a row, both at twilight. Safek l'tuma or l'korban. So now it's a doubt whether he's actually counted as impure, because remember it could have been just 1 day, and it's a doubt whether he should even have to offer a sacrifice. Because maybe it's not 3 days at all. Ra'ah yom echad ben hashmashot safek l'tuma, and it only happened 1 day. If it happened 1 day at twilight, you have to interpret it as if it happened 2 days. All right. So for both those cases, if it happened that twice at twilight, you have to offer a sacrifice. If it happened 1 time at twilight, you count it as 2 because you count it as the day before and the next day, and therefore you have to go to the mikveh. Clear? Really? All right. That took me about 10 hours to figure out before but I was able to explain it to you. Well, maybe. We'll see. All right. Now, back to the definition of twilight, because we weren't finished with that. Ha gufa kasha. So just for your own information, the word gufa in the Talmud means something like, I want to go back to something that you think maybe we dropped before, but in fact, I'm still interested in that. That's what the phrase gufa means. It says, wait a second, there's something we talked about a paragraph or two before. I'm not done talking about it yet. So the technical word for that in the Talmud is gufa. So it's, in other words, it's not responding to what we just talked about, which is stuff about emissions. It's responding to the definition of twilight, which was a paragraph ago. Ha gufa kasha. So what you told me about later, about the definition of twilight, there's an internal contradiction, kasha. There's a difficulty with that. Amar, here you said, Ezu ben hashmashot. Your definition of twilight was Mesha tishka chama. So the sun sets, kol zman shepnei mizrach madimim. The eastern face of the sky is reddish. That sounds like your definition of twilight. It seems like a pretty simple definition of twilight. It sounds like this guy actually misunderstands it. You'll see in a second. But he's reading the first definition we have of twilight is, okay, when the sky's pink, that's twilight. But now he says, ha ichsif ha-tachton velo ichsif ha-elyon lailahu. But if the bottom part of the sky, the lower part of the sky, has lost its color, but the upper part of the sky hasn't, that should be nighttime. Because what you just told me is when the sky is pink, and here he's assuming it's the whole sky, when the sky is pink, that's twilight. So even if part of the sky now has lost its color, that should be nighttime. But Vahadartana, but then you went on and said, Ichsif ha-tachton, the bottom part of the sky lost its color, Lo ichsif ha-elyon, but the top part still has that color, Ben hashmashot. But you went on to say that half and half situation is also twilight. So that's a contradiction. Either it should be the sky is pink, that's twilight, or half the sky is pink, that's not twilight, that's nighttime. Sounds to me like you're contradicting yourself. Okay? Amar Rabba. Rabba says, Amar Rav Yehuda. Rav says, in the name of Rav Yehuda. Amar Shmuel, in the name of Shmuel. Kuru chutani. So he says, no, idiot. It doesn't say idiot. But actually, the form there, implies kind of a disrespect. Yeah. Kruch. So he's saying, you just have to put the statements together. They weren't separate statements. Kruch utzni. Put the statements together and read it this way. Ezeh ben hashmashot. What is ben hashmashot? What is twilight? Mesha tishka chama. When the sun sets, kol zman shepnei mizrach madimim. The eastern part of the sky is pink. Hichsif ha-tachton. The bottom part has lost its color. Velo hichsif ha-elyon. But the top part hasn't. Nami ben hashmashot. So even that half and half period, that's also twilight. So twilight is when the whole sky is pink, or when half of the sky is pink. Okay? Put them together, and you've got a perfectly good definition. It's only when the top part and the lower part lose their pink entirely, then it's nighttime. Okay. And then he goes on. Hichsif ha'elyon ve'ishva latachton. The top part loses its color. It looks like the bottom, which has lost its color. Lila. That's night. That's a pretty good definition of twilight. It means you have to keep looking. It doesn't give you an amount of time. You have to keep the time yourself. It's assuming sometimes it's different. Although I'm not sure if that's actually the case. I'm not an expert enough. But anyhow, it's a measurable amount of time. Right? I mean, it's not like it comes and goes quickly. Right. It's a period. It's sunset. There's a period of sunset, right?
But it's also focusing just on the east, which means it's going to be much earlier.
Well, we're going to get
the west is going to be still light, so it's very lenient in terms of its definition.
It's also weird that it would focus on the east. You would think it would focus on the west, because what are you looking at? You're looking at the sun setting. So we're going to get to that. Yeah, that's a weird sort of way of. I hadn't even caught that the first time I read it. It was later when I read it, I realized, I was thinking it's just the sky. And then I was thinking, well, maybe in Israel the sun sets in the east. Well, that's but no, that wouldn't make sense. So but no, it's odd that you're looking at the eastern sky. Mizrach is the eastern sky. Okay. Hachi katani. And here's another thing that's written: Mesha tishka chama. When the sun sets, kol zman shepnei mizrach madimim yom. Okay, another way of putting it is every time the eastern sky is still pink. That's called day. Hichsif ha-tachton velo hichsif ha-elyon. The bottom part has lost its color, but the top part has lost its color. Ben hashmashot, that's twilight. So this is a different definition. So the pink sky, that's still day. It's only when the sky is half and half, that's twilight. Hichsif ha-elyon ve'ishva latachton, and the whole sky lost its color at that point, lila. That's a nice definition. That ends up being the halachic definition. It's when it's that half and half time. That's twilight. When the sky is pink, it's still day. It's not Shabbos yet. By the way, for our halachic purposes, of course, it mostly matters for Shabbat and holidays. When do Shabbat and holidays begin? That's mostly why we care about this stuff. Because we don't do too many more. We're not purifying ourselves in the mikvah because of emissions anymore. Maybe we should, but we're not. Okay.
How do they deal with cloudy or rainy days?
Well, that would be difficult. Then they have to go to the other definition, where so you can see the sun sort of setting, and it's the amount of time.
I don't see it.
I mean, the fact is we don't deal with this at all anymore. We have this new technological innovation, watches, right? We have clocks and watches, right? Calendars, and somebody just tells us Shabbos starts at 7:32. Does anybody question that? I mean, what's interesting is you could question it. Who says 7:32? I'm going to look at the sky. And when I was a kid, I followed the sky. I did. I mean, I'd follow this guy. Because Shabbos ends when there's 3 stars out. So you got to. Yeah, I did too. I'd run out and look for the stars because then you could watch TV. That was most important to me when I could watch TV. So I could watch TV, but I didn't. No one told me that there was a specific time. I'm not sure why. I went outside and looked for the stars. And the same thing with Shabbat starting. I went outside and looked at the sun. I figured that's when. And that I have to. So that's probably a better way, right? I mean, the idea is that you're supposed to be part of the natural cycles and aware of the natural cycles. That's true when it rains, it's cloudy, it's smoggy. Then it's harder. But yeah.
Why don't they use the 3 stars at the beginning of Shabbos?
Well, they want to be.
Really
it's a definition of strictness, right? They want to make sure it's really, really night. We're not going to have any doubt at all. There's not. Twilight, by the way, is still Shabbos by any definition. There's not even a doubt about it. It's got to be dark. Stars have got to be out. That's why they want to make sure that you're getting all of Shabbat. Remember, Shabbat is a gift. We don't want to end it, a minute earlier than we have to. Even though I'd like to watch TV, for the most part, it's considered a gift. So it goes into the darkness.
It's more than 24 hours.
It's more than 24 hours. It is.
Yes, it is.
Well, the Yom Kippur fast is more than 24 hours. It's 25 hours. Yeah. Okay. Anybody see? Gosh, I should go on, but there is a movie where they look at this. What's the name of that movie about the rabbi that comes from Poland and he goes to the Wild West?
Yes.
Gene Wilder's in it. What's that movie?
Frisco Kid.
Frisco Kid. So there's a scene in the Frisco Kid where he can't get on his horse and ride or something until after Shabbos. So he's looking at the sun. Is Harrison Ford in it too?
He's the cowboy.
So Harrison Ford's like, come on, we got to get going. He said, no, I'm looking at the sky. He didn't have a watch, and he'd read the Talmud. I'm looking at the sky when the sky's ready. Now, unfortunately, I love that. Unfortunately, they got it all wrong. The script writers assumed Shabbat starts when the sun sets, but it doesn't. It starts when stars come out. And I knew that because I'd grown up with that experience. So although I like the idea that he's looking at the sky to see when Shabbat ends, unfortunately they got the rule wrong. Like nobody bothered to ask me, or some rabbi any rabbi would have known. Yeah, that's too bad. And maybe they knew and they wanted to get the sunset because that's a cooler scene than just stars. I don't know. All right, I'm going to keep going. So the Talmud now follows its definition in the following discussion. De'itmar, as it says. Shi'ur ben hashmasha bekama. What's the measure? Again, it's another discussion, similar discussion. What's the duration? Give me instead of like making me look at the sky, give me a number. But what's the duration of twilight? Amar Rabba, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Shlosha chelkei mil. So they have. Remember, they're still using distances.
Right.
They're not using time. Like we would say in minutes, they talk in miles. It's really interesting. I think it's really interesting. I told you, I think a couple of weeks ago, I met with a guy from a small village in Africa that said to this day, that's what they do. They don't talk in terms of time. They say, I'll be there in half a mile. However long it takes me to go half a mile. All right, so the first definition is it's 3 parts of a mile. That's 3 parts of a mile. That's twilight. So, of course, you understand how not helpful that definition is, because 3 parts of what?
Right, yeah.
Just 3 parts of a mile. I can divide a mile into how many parts I want. It's 3 parts of it. It seems so. It must mean something more than that. Okay. My shlosha chelkei mil. So, of course, the Talmud asks, what do you mean by 3 parts of a mile? Ile matlate plage mila nami mil v'chetzia. So, if you're saying that it's let me try to figure this out. Remember that you should never trust my math in the Talmud. And also, you shouldn't trust the Talmud's math. Very often the Talmud gets math wrong. Okay, so what is the meaning of 3 parts of a meal? If it's 3 halves of a meal, so of a mile, if the 3 parts are halves, why are you saying 3 parts of a mile? Say a mile and a half. That'd be much more simple, right? Ella tlata tilte mila nami mil. Oh, and if it's 3/3 of a mile, if that's what you're saying, then that just say a mile. Why are you saying 3/3 of a mile? So what do you mean by the parts of a mile? Ella tlata riva mil, which is how I read it, by the way, the first time. It must be 3/4 of a mile. So 3/4 of a mile. So 3/4 of a mile. That's twilight. The Rav Yosef Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Shnei Chelkei Mil. But Rav Yosef says in the name of Rav Yehuda, in the name of Shmuel, it's just different of opinion. We say it's 2 parts of a mile. Now, presumably that would mean 2/4, right? Because the other guy was 3/4, so we're at 2/4. The problem is, if it's 2/4, a math teacher might say, why are you saying 2/4? Just say a half. It'd be easy to say a half, okay? My shna chelkei mil. Okay, what's the difference between that and half a mile? Ilema, you might say it's trei palge mila nema mil. So if you're saying it's 2 halves of a mile, well, that's a mile. The ela trei rive mila lema chatzil mil. But if you're saying it's 2/4 of a mile, it's half a mile. Right. So we're not sure what he's saying. You just wish these guys would be more precise. Don't just say 2 parts of a mile. Tell us what you mean. So now the Talmud has to figure it out. Ella, next page. Trei tilte mil. So what they meant was 2/3 of a mile. Okay, so one opinion is, which is obvious, by the way. So it's obvious that's what they meant. The Talmud just has some fun, just try to figure out, kind of what they meant. So one rabbi says twilight is 3/4 of a mile, and one rabbi says 2/3 of a mile. Quick math test: what's more, 3/4 or 2/3?
3/4.
Exactly, 3/4. Okay, that's going to be important in a second. My beinayu. So what's the difference between them? So evidently the narrator of the Talmud here can't really do the math. And he wants to know what's the difference between the two. Isn't that the same? No, 2/3 and 3/4 are not the same. In fact, what's the difference? Can somebody do the math without looking? 1/6. Benaya palga de tanya. It's actually 1/12. Okay. And I think we'll stop there.